Namaste and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sat means truth, logos means study or science. It's opposite of mythology. Myth means a fake lie imagination. Mythology means a science or study of fake lie imagination. If I were to ask you again, I asked you in many shows, would you ever call your family history as mythology, a fake study of fake lie imagination? I'm sure you're going to try to hit me up on that. I mean, physically hit me up, not the other way around. So the point is, mythology is such a disparaging word. Now, today I have a very good friend and a wonderful open speaker in this Bitter Truth session. This is called Bitter Truth. The name was given by Abhijit only, directly. So, Abhijit, without delay, let us welcome Sri Abhijit Iyer Mitra.
Very well, and thanks for having me on.
Abhijit, the word, there's a severe discrimination in American textbooks against Hindus. Like, for example, Max Muller had a huge propaganda against the teachers of India, which are technically called Brahman. You are also a teacher. Many other people are teacher. And the teachers of India. And the same is going on, anti-Brahmanism in University of Berkeley. And it is also in the school textbooks of USA. How detrimental or how hateful is that against Hindus?
So, see, I think we need to understand what's at play out here. First of all, if you look at it generally, the Indian right the Hindu right is something of a joke when it comes to understanding the Western discourse, to understanding the language of the discourse, and things like that. Now, I'm going to tackle this step by step because you brought up the issue of mythology. India does have a lot of mythology, right? It may be based in fact, but it is mythology nevertheless. The thing is, in Roman paganism, Egyptian paganism, and Greek paganism, Greek was different, Egyptian was different, but in Roman and Greek paganism, when you died, you just went into this gray space called Hades. And your only hope was people remembering you by your heroic deeds and things like that. So what happens in antiquity is you have this separation that develops, which is mythology. And in order to keep your actions, because there's no karma, karma basically forcing you to be good in this life, an ethical life, in which you are rewarded after death, doesn't exist. So you develop something called philosophy to maintain your actions as noble and good in this life. Now, in Hinduism, what happened was we never really had that split, right? You did have this concept of dharma and karma, to do what is right. And if you uphold dharma, you benefit in karma. So it's like, putting money into a bank and then getting interest out of it, it doubles in 7 years, or I know what the interest rate in America is right now. Pathetic, I'm assuming. I mean, if you're saving, not if you're a business. It benefits you in your next life. So we never had to separate mythology and philosophy. And so we developed something called theology, which is an extremely sophisticated philosophical explanation of all your so-called myths. Now, what are myths? Essentially, they're not lies. They are embellishments of actions that would have possibly happened. Would they have happened in India? Maybe not. But are they part of a common collective memory? Yes, they are. They would have happened at some point of time. So, for example, with the Iliad, we know there were Mycenaean city-states that went and sacked Troy, Ilium. And it's clearly not mythology except the part where the gods intervene. So again, with Rama going to Sri Lanka, very similar story. The God part, we can all, dispute. But did it happen? In all probability, it did. Because there are a lot of things that are in our so-called mythology, which we then dig up and discover. Now, this same thing, you don't call it mythology when it applies to, say, the history of the Jews, for example, or the history of Islam, for example. There's a lot of convincing scholarship that Muhammad was just one amongst many people who formed initial Muslim thought. And it was the Abbasid revolution. So you first had the four righteous caliphs, then you had the Umayyad Caliphate, and then the Abbasid revolt against the Umayyads, which starts off in Persia and is on the shoulders of Turkic troops. And it fits neatly into a narrative to then make Muhammad the prime, uh, you know, object of the discourse, the prime prophet in that sense. There is a lot of evidence emerging to prove that. Similarly, you go and nobody actually questions that the Exodus ever happened. Yet we now know there's this amazing book called The Bible Unearthed by Israel Finkelstein, which shows you that the Israelis have always been native to Israel. They never came from Egypt. There was no exodus out of Egypt. They were always native to that place. So, there's the nomenclature, yes. The problem is Hindus themselves don't understand the language, and they say, look, we also have a mythology, there's nothing wrong in it. But in that case, the Bible is also a lot of mythology plus a lot of theology, which is what we also have. A lot of mythology plus a lot of theology. Now, why do Americans teach a certain stylized version of Indian history? It's pretty much, I don't blame the Americans. It's just that the right hasn't developed the kind of sophisticated discourse and academic tools in order to make its point very clearly. Okay, it doesn't. Hindus, as a rule, don't tend to play victim. And these days, when you want to get things going, you have to play the victim card. I think this entire textbook case happened when Arnold Schwarzenegger was the California textbook case happened when Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor of California, and it was shot down there precisely because there were a lot of lefty Indians in America saying, "Oh, no, 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 this is an attempt." They played the victim card. That was one of the proto victim card victories that happened in courts out there. So it's generally been cumulative tactical failure on the part of Indians. And as long as we continue to fulminate over it, steam over it, but do nothing to make our discourse sophisticated, or even bother studying sociology, because sociology and anthropology in India are so backward, it's not even funny. And the problem is the right tends to be local, the left tends to be global. All leftists across the world talk the same language, more or less. All rightists tend to be very, very localized. They do not talk the same language. They don't even understand what's happening in each other's countries. At most, you can see maybe the Anglophone rightists tend to come together, kind of, but not entirely.
I will read you one of the few lines, and you'll be shocked to know. See that it is said over here, and I'm reading the exact words here. The Bhagavad Gita is a self-contained episode of Mahabharata. It is not correct because it is part of the Panchodvinsha Adhyaya in the third book of Mahabharata. The second is Krishna said Arjuna's caste. Now the word caste is not used here. Krishna actually never said it. Now again, they are misrepresenting Krishna as a person who is promoting caste. Krishna Bhagavan says very clearly.
Again, I'm not going to get into the micro detail, right? Because the micro detail, I leave it up to others. Yeah. The point here is, where do you actually have all the references that have been mainstreamed in India for Western scholarship to refer to? I mean, you even look at a right-wing channel like Fox News. Who would it call from India? It will call left-wing scholars and left-wing historians from India, because even the current Indian government, which is allegedly a Hindu nationalist government, is like a very sweet dog that wants its bone and its pat on the head saying good boy from leftist. It craves validation, right? It's like what Groucho Marx said, I don't want to be part of a club that'll have me as its member. And the classic example of that is the BJP for several set of reasons. First, like I said, they don't come from a very educationally sophisticated background. They don't come from a very socially upward background. They're probably first generation nouveau riche, or become nouveau riche, or come from abject poverty, like our prime minister does, and they desperately seek validation of a certain class which doesn't exist. So they don't even promote their own narratives. They won't even mainstream those narratives, use state power to mainstream it. What do you expect? Okay, so this is what you get when you don't use things intelligently. There's no point blaming America or American courts for it. Let's look within and see where the blame lies. Okay, because honestly, and I'm sorry to keep restating this, but Indians haven't won a war in the last what 1,000 years, pretty much a proper war in the last 1,000 years. We're schmucky tacticians and we're schmucky theoreticians. You know, after we invented the zero, that was our last theoretical invention, the zero in 700 AD or something like that. We decided to collectively reduce ourselves to zero because we were so enamored that we came up with such a wonderful abstraction. We're like, oh, yeah, let's make ourselves zero. So we're an aspirational zero country.
You made a very valid point that Indians, it is responsibility of the Indians or the Indian government to challenge these narratives. And you're right that they have not appointed you, they have not corrected the narration yet in India. You're
And
absolutely right.
Aditya, do you remember? Do you remember in the California case, the people who wanted to preserve the California textbook wording were Indians. White people did not testify. It was Indians testifying against the people who wanted to have it changed to a more Hindu friendly interpretation. The other issue also tends to be we tend to be unnecessarily defensive and apologetic, which again comes from our lack of social studies training and understanding nuance or scholarship in that sense. So, for example, it is a fact that caste was horrible. It is a fact that sometime around 500 AD, you do see in the genetic record that severe endogamy sets in, which restricts your ability to absorb. You also see sometime around this, after this endogamy setting in, definitely by around 700 AD, that what happens is you have a very, very strong degradation of all your intellectual schools of thought. Because what is happening is you're essentially, why does endogamy take place? It usually happens when you're de-urbanizing. A lack of endogamy, heterogamy, if you want to call it that, is usually the product of either extremely freewheeling tribal societies or extremely urban societies. And what you see here, so for example, the Roman Empire, they had Arabs as, they had Greeks, they had Arabs, they had Spaniards as emperor. They didn't care as long as you were Roman in, your general comportment. To be a Roman was an idea in that sense, right? But you don't see that happening in India anymore. So what happens is, first, your economic, you see deurbanization and economic collapse that comes from deurbanization, which is a very similar process that's happening in Persia and Europe at the same time. And then you have this entire sort of collapse of narrative, collapse of archiving, where you don't store your things properly. And storing alone is not enough. Retrieval is also important. You lose that ability. So there's a lot of things happening at that point of time, which incidentally is mirrored in Europe. So if you read Barbara Tuchman's A Calamitous 14th Century, you see that there were severe restrictions placed on who could marry whom. There were severe restrictions placed on who could wear what, who could go where, etc., etc., etc. Now, Europe industrialized very quickly after, say, the 1600s, early 1700s, almost definitely happening. In India, even after the British left, we did not industrialize. So, it's transposing certain Indians themselves don't understand the sociology and anthropology behind why certain things exist. And caste is going to continue in India till you have urbanization and industrialization, which is the one thing the government will never do. Okay, because they're too socialist for that. And in order to distribute money, you need to first grow the pie. Nobody objects to socialism as long as you allow people to make money in order to distribute that money. Right now, there's money being, you're not allowing people to make money to distribute that money. Okay. There's also, and you know my opinion on this, there's two differences. There's investing in people, human capital development, and socialism. I oppose socialism, I don't oppose human capital development. What's the difference? Socialism plus accountability equals human capital development. Or human capital development is basically or socialism is basically human capital development devoid of all accountability. You just throw money, waste money. So there's a lot of issues out here, and the West is very, very bad at imposing its Weltanschauung onto other places. This is the same stupidity they did in Afghanistan. To think that you could take a sedentary pastoralist society, and pastoralist societies tend to be a lot more violent than agrarian societies for a variety of reasons I'm not going to get into here. You impose a first world industrial concept onto Afghanistan when you liberate it in 2001, that somehow you're going to plow in this money and it's going to become this glorious place full of women's rights and LGBTQ rights and all of that. And that's no different in policy terms from holding hands and singing Kumbaya.
The American authors, and some of them are not alive, so with due respect, because I don't want to comment on dead people, but American authors, they wrote a book called Traditions and Encounters. Jerry Bentley and Herbert Ziegler, their viewpoint is a carbon copy of Max Muller. It's not an original work. What Max Muller wrote.
I think we really need to stop focusing on what they said. The issue isn't what they said. Other cultures always tend to misinterpret other cultures. The issue is, why are Indians such blithering idiots? Why are we such an accumulation of zeros? I think it was Abdul Gamal Nasser who said the sum total of 50 zeros equals zeros. So you can have 1.3 billion zeros, but as long as you have as long as they're all zeros, the cumulative effect of adding 1.3 billion zeros remains zeros. So again, let's stop talking about them. Let's look within us and see why we've remained zeros in all of this.
Totally agree with you, because it is our duty to represent ourselves correctly. Very valid point. Because I was part of the textbook reformation committee in California, and it was led by a Chinese American, a Filipino American, and a British American from University of Berkeley and other people in California. And most of the Indians opposed me because I was countering their facts. I did not have any chance. So the problem comes in scholarly consensus. And I did not have a backing of a large Indian community also, because we have a large community, but you're absolutely right. Nobody came forward to work, and nobody opposes also. So,
because remember, it is also a cartelized mafia in the sense. The most pleasant experiences I've noticed in academia is when people reinforce what you're saying. People mostly don't like hearing things that contradict them. And what ends up happening is that Chinese professors, Korean professors, Singaporean professors, Japanese professors, they tell you what you need to know, and they have that self-confidence to hold their ground. Indian professors, as a rule, only tell you what you want to hear, not what you need to know. And because that kind of flattery works a completely different way, it then gets cartelized, and then they want to prevent anybody that proves them wrong. For example, the classic example of this is Modi. They all portrayed Modi as Darth Vader. If you get I'm going to use a Disney and a Star Wars analogy here. They portrayed Narendra Modi as Darth Vader. He turned out to be Daffy Duck or Donald Duck, whatever have you. I don't know what you recognize, but that's what he turned out to be, Daffy Duck or Donald Duck. The problem is that they can't back off from it, even though there is now enough, more than enough, not just circumstantial, but actual evidence that he is, in fact, Daffy Duck or Donald Duck. He's just plain incompetent. but they will still persist in this definition of this narrative of him being Darth Vader. And the sad thing is, it's a trap that you can't really get off. I mean, you can't have the BJP come out and say, no, no, no. I mean, they can say, no, 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 our leader is not Darth Vader, but they can't say our leader is Daffy Duck either. Right. So it's one of those things. The left can't get out its narrative, and that is now the narrative. And the right can't correct the narrative. So again, let's look within ourselves. It's just pointless going on cribbing about what other people say.
Now, one of the next point which comes here, you correctly said the Indians' responsibility is to do that. The Indian universities, I have not seen a single debate on the international narrative in the Indian university academic circles also. What is the reason for that?
The reason is it's a very close. It's called a reference cycle, where everybody only recommends the same newspapers and the same point of view. The editors will then recommend the same people as intellectuals. Those intellectuals will only refer to the same papers and things like that. And of course, when you have a closed cycle like that, you can't break the cycle. You need disruption to the cycle, which unfortunately we don't have, which is why you don't have a debate. And what does the Indian right? It's usually a confident society looks at the future. A non-confident society keeps trying to fix the past. So, this whole ISIS thing, wanting to recreate the Rashidun Caliphate, looking back at the past. Throughout Europe's growth as a Christian region, when it was a miserable, nasty shithole, effectively, to use Trump's words, they'd keep looking back to create the kingdom of Christ. Once industrialization and things like that set in, today you tell me who's thinking about the kingdom of God cometh in Europe anymore? They're all looking forward to the future. A confident society looks to the future. A failed society keeps looking to the past. And in India, it is a failed society, or, well, an ossified, uninteresting, self-loathing, lack of confidence society, which is constantly obsessed on what happened in the past. And there it's either trying to justify it, which is the worst kind of crap that you can have, or trying to put all kinds of nonsensical spin on it. Invariably, you go to something right-wing, there'll be a thing on, did human beings actually fly in the Ramayana and Mahabharata? When we talk about the Pushpaka Vimana, was it actually the Airbus A350, or was it the Boeing 787? Or you will have a third party of complete lunatics who will claim it wasn't just flight, it was supersonic flight, and it was the predecessor of the Concorde and the Tu-144, the Tupolev. I'm being very hyperbolic here, but that is essentially what these debates go around, and they're kind of a celebration of quackery in that sense.
You put a very right point on scholarly consensus, that how scholarly consensus is missing one viewpoint. That's essentially you said. Scholarly consensus is just repeating validation, and it's a cabal, academic cabal, I call it.
Now, let me give you an example. One of the Indians who's deemed a emerging foreign policy scholar in Indian foreign policy scholar in America is this chap called Mohammad Zishan. Yesterday, he tweeted something absolutely ridiculous, saying, "This is my analysis, and this is what Ram Guha confirmed to me, that India has had more systemic persecution than, say, Russia, a systemic religious conflict, than, say, Russia or Turkey," which is such a load of hogwash, both on Zishan Mohammad's part and on Ram Guha's part. The Russians sent in tanks into Grozny twice. There was a glorious civil war happening there. They destroyed Grozny building by building. They destroyed it completely. Okay, they went in there with tanks. The first time they were defeated, and the second time they won, but then again Grozny was destroyed. We've never had anything like that in India. And he's talking about Turkey, really? The Armenian genocide, the Assyrian genocide, really? Even currently, the institutional discrimination against non-Muslim minorities in Turkey. People like to believe it's a secular state. It never was. It never was. Even under Kemal Ataturk, there were still a lot of institutional discriminations against ethnic and linguistic minorities. Till the 1980s, the Kurds couldn't even speak their own language. It was banned to speak Kurdish. So, this is the kind of hogwash that passes off as scholarship and will constantly keep getting validated because you will never see a informed counter to it, or when there is an informed counter to it, the right never agrees on a certain thing, so it will never bury its own hatchet. It's very, very individualistic in that sense. So, it's the classic thing. Turks are invading, you can't unite, enjoy yourself. 1,000 years of slavery.
Now, Turkey has been a known human rights violator, what they did in Armenia and many other places, including Cyprus. We know that very well.
And mind you, attacks on Kurds are increasing day by day by day. If you actually look at the current statistics, there is not a single week that goes past without extremely violent attacks on the Kurds. Okay, Turkey is essentially, the way it is using terror as a tool of policy, of foreign policy, it is essentially ensuring it goes down the path of Pakistan. Where I see Turkey today is the same place that Pakistan was under Ayub Khan. Huge economic growth and then collapse because you supported terror as a tool of state policy. Same thing happens here. Great growth under Erdogan, and then you support terror as a tool of state policy, and kaboom.
Coming back to India and our topic today, I have seen in IIT Kanpur, IIT Kharagpur, and prominent technical institutes worried about the Indian narrative, but that doesn't come to the national level education policy. And these are great scholars. I refer to their work many times. I wrote 2 translations on Gita, one for the Americans, one for the Indians. But and I really love the work they have done, but it doesn't come into the mainstream. Do you think new education policy will change that?
It won't, because again, the new education policy takes a lot of jargon and buzzwords from the West. We're not going to learn by rote. We're going to learn individual personality development and problem solving. Now, understand, a problem solving education is a quality education. In India, you have a quantity problem, which is why you had the learning by rote system. You didn't create centers of excellence where you would filter out particularly intelligent students, put them into a graded education system. Why? Because you made the stupidity of making it a concurrent subject, which is the central government runs it, the state government runs it, and minorities have their own syllabus. So you have the Anglo-Indian syllabus, you have the Tamil Nadu, the Bengal, the Andhra state board syllabuses. Even in the central syllabus, you've got 2 syllabi. You've got the ICSE and the CBSE. I don't know what the full form stands for. You focus on all the wrong crap. True educational reforms would have been understanding that you have a quantity problem, solve it. Do what Switzerland did with goat herders. Teach them the basics. Don't teach them crap that they're not going to remember. Teach them the basics in easy to understand language that they will remember. Don't fetishize English. At the same time, don't go anti-English either, the way we do in India, unfortunately, that, it's an unnatural. English is not a language. English is a skill. You can't survive in the modern day world without mathematics. Similarly, you can't survive in the modern world without English. It is not a language, it is a skill. Okay, there's other problems too. The spoken language in India and the written language are completely different. Written Hindi is extremely formal. Spoken Hindi is extremely casual, and it's very different. In Tamil, it's almost like two completely different languages. Bangla, less so, but it's still quite different. So, there's a whole set of problems that we're looking at. And then, you have the malnourishment problem. 45% of India is malnourished, 33% is stunted. Both malnourishment and stunting significantly limit your cognitive abilities. And in the case of stunting, what happens is those cognitive limitations last for about 3 generations. So you can't even teach them properly. This is not an education policy that is based on first principles research or any known solutions. They've just done what they always do out here because we don't have a statistics department, a proper department that collates statistics and things like that. And we only have ministers who want good news. They don't want to listen to bad news. So you don't actually solve problems. Okay, Indian policy is run by chimpanzees. It is not run by human beings. The difference being human beings innovate, chimpanzees mostly copy. There is innovation, but it's very little. So we are a country of, well, run by chimpanzees. It's not Hindustan, it's Chimpanzeeistan.
A very popular retort to that question will come, and it has come in the chat box also, that the current Indian government is considered the best by majority of Indians, and
No, they're considered the best by 36% of Indians, not a majority of Indians. And mind you, a lot of people like me, I will keep voting for this government. I will vote for this government in the next election as well. Why? Because they're bad, but the opposition is even worse. So remember, the BJP has traditionally been a 140 to 160 seat party. Modi made it a traditionally over 200 seat party, the absolute majority in parliament being 272. But I will always argue that the man who made the BJP an absolute majority party that will consistently for the next 20, 30 years continue to get an absolute majority over 272 is Rahul Gandhi. After Narendra Modi, Rahul Gandhi is the biggest campaigner of the BJP. He's the star campaigner of the BJP. I know several leaders in the BJP who literally do prayers for Rahul Gandhi's health. Their biggest fear is he's going to go to Bangkok and overdose, and we don't want that. And they pray to all 13 million, 13 zillion, 13 billion gods, or the one God that they believe in, depending on which school of thought you come from, to pray for Rahul Gandhi's health. Okay, so let's not confuse performance with popularity. Nehru was an extremely popular prime minister. Indira Gandhi was an extremely popular prime minister. That doesn't mean that they were complete catastrophes economically. So let's be very clear, performance and electoral performance and economic performance are two different things. In India, economics does not win you elections. If economics did, then Vajpayee would have won the 2004 elections. He did not. If economics was, then P.V. Narasimha Rao, who was probably India's greatest prime minister ever, should have won the 1996 elections. He did not. There's actually a very good correlation between bad economics and winning elections. In India, election victories are reserved for jackasses.
In the description, I'm going to put Abhijit will always vote for BJP. I'm going to put that in the description of the video. Now, another word comes.
Abhijit has no choice except to vote for BJP.
Another point is the word comes papu. And it's being a joke in India on the word papu. But what about the academic papus who do not oppose the Western narrations?
But they're celebrated in India. Don't you understand? They're celebrated in India. Nobody calls them papus. They are venerated by the West as great scholars of India. Okay, you take the time when India turned Nazi, that was under Jawaharlal Nehru during the 1962 war with China. Thousands of Chinese Indians, based purely on their ethnicity, even though they'd been born and brought up in India, never been to China, didn't even speak Chinese at home, were taken and interred in concentration camps. Many thousands of them died. And what does Ram Guha put it down to in his book? It was zeitgeist. But you celebrate him in America as the greatest historian of modern India. Congratulations to you. Enjoy yourselves.
So would you categorize people, all these academic papoos, we can say, they
They're not
are,
academic papoos. We are the academic papoos. Remember that. Because even though you have truth on your side, we're so dumb, we haven't been able to make an impact.
most
Okay,
of these,
they are seriously clever people. They are crooks that can take anybody for a ride. Hats off to them. I respect that.
so most of these people, they get Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, and the likes of which we are like, they are still enslaving our mind with the colonized narratives. And you rightly said, past is past, now let's plan for the future. You're absolutely right, because the past karma cannot be changed, but the future karma can be changed. So
You can change your future karma if you're honest with yourself, if you
that's
do
right.
honest introspection and you ask the right questions.
Correct.
You don't ask the right questions, you end up with the wrong answers. So I work in defense, and I can tell you that there's something called the DPP, the Defense Production Policy, which is allegedly our roadmap for indigenizing defense production in this country. There have been three, four, five iterations of that thing, and it still hasn't changed. And if you've done the same thing over and over and over again, and things aren't changing, a sane man would sit down and ask, where have I gone wrong? That doesn't happen in India. Okay? Because nobody wants to be wrong. So that entire, I see a lot of Hindus mouthing off about Hinduism. Oh, it's such a great religion. It's so this, it's so that. But in the way they behave, they haven't imbibed an iota, not one single iota of the introspection. They'll meditate, but what's the point of meditation if you can't look within?
Valid point.
Okay, so what's happened is this pop yoga culture, this pop meditation culture. Oh, I'm going to go over the weekend and have a chai latte and do meditation. What the hell is a chai latte, for crying out loud? For fuck's sakes, there's no such thing as a chai latte. But anyway, I'm going to do chai latte and do meditation and then go to my country club and then go get a Botox done. That's what they do. Hindu philosophy is a joke today. It's been brought down to the level of a joke. Because essentially, what you have is the peddling of pop culture as something profound. And I'll leave it there.
You are absolutely right. In India, I can tell you one thing: the cost of Starbucks coffee is like ridiculous as compared to in the US. People can afford it because it's the only way. But converting directly into Indian. Now, coming back to the last point you said about defense, just one last question. We have said enough about Hindu phobia and other origins, academic, scholarly consensus. We've spoken enough, I think, for the viewers. Will India buy ATAGs or will it go for an Israeli gun? And the second is, will Tejas MK2 will be ever see the light now? Because I see a lot of opposition or the fake propaganda in the media now.
If the plane does well, we probably won't buy it. It'll get scuttled. If it does very badly, we'll probably end up buying it because India is a society that celebrates failure. Okay. In case of which gun we will buy, we will invariably buy the gun which gives the generals the greatest kickbacks and India the least amount of benefits. Even though on paper it will say it will give you the greatest benefits, but mark my words, you still won't be able to indigenize it. So it's the same damn joke over and over and over again. This is it's just so frustrating. It's just never ending. You could have done a lot. You could have, the M777, the light howitzer we bought from America. You could have just bought the entire production line because India was the last customer and then the production line shut down. You could have just bought the production line, transferred it to India, start making it here, and then do a tracked self-propelled version, a wheeled self-propelled version, and it's already a field howitzer. You didn't do that. Why didn't you do that? You're too stupid to do that. Because your military doesn't understand economics. They think money grows on trees. What do you do? There you go.
Abhijit, thank you so much. It's always wonderful to talk to you. And I think you show the mirror to many people. And that is the whole point of Sattology, is that we need to see within, not outside. We have to blame ourselves for our past failures as well as future successes also, and gain the credit. One who takes all the blame is eligible to get all the credit also. You know? So thank you so much, Abhijit.
Thank you. Well, 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 well.
Thank you.